tasteMAKERS was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
The average head of lettuce travels 2,000 miles to make it to your grocery store. So what if we wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of our food by growing produce in urban farms? In this episode of tasteMAKERS, you're going to meet Matt Lebon, who is building permaculture foodscapes across the city of St. Louis. I'm Kat Neville, and for the past 2 decades, I've been telling the story of local food. In that time, American food culture has exploded in tiny towns and big cities from coast to coast. In tasteMAKERS, I explore the maker movement and take you along for the journey to meet the makers who define the flavor of American cuisine. You may want to grow your own food, but where exactly should you begin? Building a successful garden takes expertise, and so here in St. Louis, Matt Lebon is building permaculture sustainable foodscapes for everyone from churches to chefs to schools, and even folks just like you who want to eat just a little bit closer to home.
I would define permaculture as nature-inspired design. It's an ethic and it's a design methodology. The ethic is about taking care of the earth, taking care of people, and sharing of surplus. And the other component of that is a lot more ecological minded. And it says, well, how is nature solving a lot of the problems that it has to manage? Ultimately, we have to be ecological engineers. You know, we have to figure out all the workarounds because obviously we're not getting rid of the city. So how do we create the same pattern? And permaculture is so much about patterns and looking at the patterns of nature. How do we create patterns that mimic it to the greatest degree possible? I started custom foodscaping mostly because I felt like I'd been so interested in the food farming and permaculture world, and I just felt flooded with all of this interest in people wanting to create what I call food producing landscapes. From small raised bed vegetable gardens to bigger food forests to regenerative agriculture farms. People needed help. And I thought, well, St. Louis has nobody doing this, and I feel like this is such an opportunity to create something new in our community that would address this demand that I'm seeing for people to have somebody who is at the table who actually knows about farming and gardening when planning their farm and garden, which I feel like so often is not necessarily happening. We are here in South City, St. Louis, Missouri, and we're just on a city lot in what we call the urban food forest. It's a 5,200 square foot lot that is primarily made up of edible plants and native flowers, rain gardens, rainwater catchment, and everything that we can do to try to live close to the land and grow our own food in the middle of the city.
We're deep in the heart of the city. And when I think about these types of backyards, like a lot of you at home probably have, you know, it seems like by default it's grass and a few trees and some shrubs that you picked up at the local store. How long did it take for you to build this? This almost seems completely daunting to the average person to, you know, to aspire to, essentially.
We're in year 4 at this site here, and it really has taken 4 years for us to get to this point, you know. So like any big project, it was a phased plan, you know. It starts out with, okay, what's goal 1, you know, and in permaculture design, goal 1 is usually water management. So the very first thing we did on the site is figure out how are we going to keep water on the land and sink it in? And so that's why we've gotten more and more into the idea of rain gardens. And rain gardens can actually absorb thousands of gallons of water in a small space. It's a hole in the ground that fills up with water that comes from a higher place, whether it be higher up in the landscape on a hill or off of a house. So then it has a chance to sink in. The plants that we plant in rain gardens are very adept at utilizing all that water and helping move it through their root systems and then evapotranspiring it into the atmosphere where we want all that water going.
Rather than into the storm drains. You're capturing that resource and using it for what nature intended it to be used for.
Exactly, yeah.
So for people at home who want to maybe baby step into something like this, what are some small things that people can do to start to make a difference at their own house?
Yeah, I think there's a few different strategies that make a lot of sense for most people. The first is thinking about their fence edges and just the edges of their property. So think about planting some kind of edible hedge or even a linear food forest where maybe you put in a few fruit trees and some herbs around those different fruit trees. It's so easy to grow herbs, and it's such a beautiful introduction into all the flavors and the smells that, you know, we're used to just seeing already appear on our dishes. And I think that's a really great place to get started.
It's a good introduction. So tell me about this roselle plant, because its blossoms are pretty interesting.
So many of the plants that we put in are perennials, and then when we design these landscapes, we put in annuals to fill in space and look beautiful. So the roselle is actually a hibiscus family plant. So if you've had hibiscus tea, it makes these gorgeous flowers. But if you grab them before they actually make a huge flower, the calyx, which is the area that kind of encases the flower before it opens up, in the case of roselle, it's kind of tangy and crunchy, and it lends itself well to tea or being, you know, candied by chefs or putting it on all kinds of dishes.
I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole
Oh my
on
goodness.
just all the different amazing things that you could plant. This is the kind of thing that you could apply no matter where you live, no matter what your environment is. You just have to find what thrives locally.
Absolutely.
Earth Dance is an organic farm school that is located right in the heart of Ferguson, Missouri. Matt was the farm manager here for about 5 years, and he built these permaculture orchards that continue to thrive and teach people about this unique style of agriculture. Give me an overview of what you do here.
At Earth Dance, we teach people from all walks of life where healthy food comes from and how to grow it themselves. This is the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi in continuous organic production since 1883.
So Matt Lebon, he was the farm director here for 5 years.
Right.
And he kind of left this lasting impression literally on the school.
Matt is deeply beloved here. He conceived the idea for a 1 acre pear orchard to start off with, because who's growing organic pears in the Midwest? And the idea expanded and grew until it became a dispersed orchard interspersed with our mixed vegetables all across the farm. Over 200 fruit trees, so many different kinds.
Well, and I love the fact that what he built was perennial, and it really is this kind of legacy that he leaves behind where you can continue to teach people the principles of this type of growing, which as our resources become more and more stretched, water in particular, it's a way for people to grow sustainable gardens at home. So obviously this is a farm school, but beyond teaching people about organic farming practices, what value does the farm have, particularly for Ferguson?
I think that it is a point of pride. I think that being able to say that something special like this happens here, and it's, you know, completely the opposite of the media image of Ferguson, #Ferguson.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we have neighbors that come by and pick some food sometimes. We sell at the Ferguson Farmers Market. We employ Ferguson youth, and increasingly we're looking to donate produce and partner with other organizations in Ferguson that are doing good work to provide them with good food to further their good work.
One of the advantages of growing your own is that chefs and makers are not restricted by what they can get from their produce distributor. Here at Confluence Kombucha in the Grove, they pull from co-owner Julie Villarini's backyard to supply the kitchen with some pretty unique items. So let's get inside and check it out. Tell me about your approach to kombucha. There are a lot of folks who are making kombucha these days, and what makes yours a little bit different?
Yeah, so we make kombucha, I think, in the most traditional, authentic way possible. Very small batches, all by hand, all done in glass. And then we infuse the kombucha with a lot of local ingredients.
Which is exactly why we're standing here, because not only local, but actually stuff that's coming out of your backyard. You bought this house in the Shaw neighborhood of St. Louis, and it's a total redo.
Yeah.
The yard is completely overgrown. You had an idea of what you wanted, but how to actually make that come to life. That's kind of what Matt helped you with.
Right. We got together and we said, what could we do to transform this space into things that we could use in the kombucha or in the restaurant?
And so why did you do that at your house and not just, you know, work with a farmer? Why did you want it to be at home?
Seeing something from the ground up, seeing it every day, living with it, seeing it transform from a shoot to a flower to a berry to a kombucha, it was just something that I felt was a way for me to connect and for us to connect more deeply with our products.
It's fantastic. You have this vegetable that Matt planted called fuki. So tell me about what fuki is.
So fuki is a Japanese stem vegetable. So we use the stems to pickle. It can also be steamed. That's the traditional Japanese way to make it. But the leaves of the fuki can be used kind of like a banana leaf to wrap and steam, you know, fish or rice, things like that. So when he told me that it grows well in St. Louis and our climate and our soil, I was really excited to have it in my backyard.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And now you're able to give your customers something totally unique that
Right.
they've probably never had before. And that's what I love about it too, is that I think there's a lot of fulfillment for the person who is, you know, growing and managing the garden, but you're able to translate that to education and more inspiration for people who kind of like have these aha moments when they come in and taste something here.
Right.
Foodscapes at a restaurant or even in your backyard are a no-brainer. But what about at a school? Here at Principia School in St. Louis, there is a permaculture orchard that serves as a living classroom, and students learn about food as well as sustainability.
We were doing field trips around the area, and we went and visited Earth Dance Farms in Ferguson and met Matt Lebon. And he taught us all about what permaculture is, and we were able to see and witness permaculture agriculture in practice.
Principia, they got turned on to this idea of permaculture. And that led them to Earth Dance, where they went on a field trip. They learned more about permaculture, which is all about regenerative landscapes and perennial plants, unique planting schemes that aim to both provide food and habitat.
Students were able to take that information in, and essentially they came back to class and said, we want to build this. We want this here on campus. And here we're able to garden, essentially, create food for people and the planet in a way that works seamlessly with nature.
I worked with them to help find a spot on campus that was suitable, and it turns out that the same kind of land that is pretty unsuitable for a lot of activities is very much suitable for orchards, which in this case is sloping land that is kind of hard to manage. Fruit trees love growing in those environments.
Why is something like this beneficial in a school setting? Like, why do you think maybe other schools should think about putting in some sort of a garden or permaculture landscape?
I think it's a really good way of teaching kids where their food comes from, which might or might not change their mind on where they get their food from, make them more efficient with that, which, I mean, it's somewhat of a little thing, but those little things add up and help us improve our climate for sure.
This orchard is all about having organic kind of products for us here. And it's really about how to have a sustainable lifestyle and what we can have here and then bring it to our kitchen to use basically every single day. You're not just sitting in a classroom, you're being hands-on, and it gets students to being more energetic and actually wanting to come into that class.
For the betterment of humanity is what we're about at this school. And so having students be able to understand what the challenges are of today, wherever they are on their interest level, is so critical to next steps for our world.
And now we're stopping by Vicia here in St. Louis. We're going to check in with Tara Galina and talk about how this garden supplies the kitchen as well as the bar. We're in the middle of the Cortex, the tech hub of St. Louis, and what I love is that we have this beautiful garden just right over my shoulder, and it kind of serves as this buffer between the urban core of the city and this amazing farm-driven restaurant.
Yeah, it's talk about bringing it right front and center. Our whole restaurant philosophy is really about celebrating local food here in the Midwest, and particularly in St. Louis.
So there's the visual element for the guests, but there's practical applications too.
We've been able to pretty much eliminate the bulk herb ordering we're doing through our, kind of bigger purveyors. We can get basil, parsley, thyme, rosemary, lavender, all these awesome, very flavorful herbs. Anise hyssop is a big one that we use too, just right from outside. The cooks get to be a part of that, so they get their hands in the mix, get to learn about the plants also, which I think it's nice to get them out of the kitchen, even if it's a hot day like today, but to be able to kind of have that experience every day is really neat.
So beyond the herbs though, you have a fig tree, you have tomatoes, you have peppers.
Jujubes even, which are a really cool native tree.
So what are you guys going to make for us today?
So our tomato salad is sort of one of our key dishes that we serve throughout the summer. Missouri is very famous for awesome tomatoes, especially when we have this really hot weather, and they're accentuated by just delicious herbs from the garden. So it's as simple as cutting them up, harvesting them, scattering them all over the top of this bowl of marinated tomatoes with fruits like plums and cucumber, and just really nice and bright. But the herbs just make everything pop. So everything from mince to basil to anise hyssop, it's just so delicious.
So you use the garden obviously in the kitchen, but you use it behind the bar as well. And your bar program is very seasonal. It's really innovative and driven by herbs and fruits and veggies.
Yeah, so our botanical beverages menu is what we call it, and it's really just driven by all these wonderful plants and flowers in particular. So one drink that I think surprised me the most that we've developed is called the straw flower, which is something we've planted because they're beautiful, and I thought they would be great to use as floral arrangements in the restaurant. And I didn't really think they had a culinary value, but it turns out our bartender, Phil Ingram, is very talented, and he has been harvesting them and making a tea out of them.
Oh, cool.
And extracting this really delicious flavor. It has like a honey quality to it. And I never thought we would get sort of that second purpose out of them, and now it's almost like this refreshing honey iced tea cocktail, which I just love and is beautiful, and I think is a perfect example of how you kind of have to think outside the box sometimes and work with what you've got.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that is so valuable about the opportunity to plant these kind of foodscapes, is that you can decide that you want to grow ingredients that are kind of unique to you.
Yeah.
So how did you decide on the mix? Did you work with Matt on kind of designing something, or did you already know what you wanted to plant?
Matt really helped guide us through this whole process, and he's so passionate about what he does.
Yeah.
And when he brought us this first rendering of how he thought this was going to look, I almost didn't believe him. It's like, this can't be possible, and it's exceeded, I think, what we both thought would be possible here.
Here at Jubilee Community Church in North St. Louis, the garden that they built in collaboration with Matt feeds not only the community spirit, it also provides a much needed revenue stream for the church itself.
If you know anything about North City, you know there's a lot of land vacancy out in that area. And Jubilee Church is working to do so many amazing things to lift up that community. And one of the things that they did recently was purchase the vacant plot of land that was behind their church. So there's this opportunity to transform this barren lot into something that creates some real interest in the community. We worked with them to actually design and lay out a food forest. The beds and the plantings are oriented to keep water on that site, sink it into the ground. We are using tons of plants that are very adept at going deep into the soil and breaking up the decades of compaction and bricks and rocks and other things that are in the soil.
What is going to happen with this food? Is it going to serve the community? Is it going to be a revenue stream for the church? How does this impact you?
It'll be a combination of the above. We will definitely eat it ourselves as neighbors in the community who are working in the garden. It'll be used for some of the outreach of the church. We could sell to restaurants. Actually, the first part of our harvest from the garden a couple weeks ago got sold over at the food co-op.
The value of having a garden like this in the neighborhood is that this is technically a food desert. People don't have access to whole, healthy, organic foods. And so I've got a lot of folks, they're probably like, I've never seen a fig plant. I probably never have eaten a fresh fig. And this is giving them access to something they would never have the opportunity to access otherwise.
Absolutely. And it's just, it just gets you connected. When you're picking weeds in the garden or you're picking vegetables in the garden or out here in the orchard, you just talk together. That creates community.
I've lived in North St. Louis my whole life. At one time, North St. Louis was booming. We had everything. Then all of a sudden, nothing, you know? So we're really a desert of almost everything. Jobs, grocery stores, furniture stores, really employment. There's nothing really on the north side. It's gonna open up again, but it has to take all of us. I could just as easily leave, but that's not something I wanna do. I want to stay here, I want to help our community, I want to be a part of our community. People will come here and they need food, and Jubilee has food inside the church, which was donated to them, and we give it to the community. We have this garden, which we want to share with everybody, not just Jubilee, but the whole community. All they have to do is come and ask.
You know, I think that the most powerful moments that I've had in my life are related to harvesting food right out of my yard or out of a neighbor's yard. Not at some massive farm, but kind of in places that feel secret garden-like or where there's just magic happening. And you say, I had no idea this existed. I've never seen this plant. I've never tasted this flavor. So I think creating as much of that as possible was what I really sought to design and what we're still working towards here. Foodscaping and permaculture and ecological farming can be of great impact to people and planet. We have all these different mechanisms to try to get people inspired and flip the switch and help them see that we're so interconnected with all this. And I think that because we eat 3 meals a day and we all get what good food is about for the most part, then using food as a tool to create those light bulb moments is absolutely what this is all about. There's so many really inspiring things that are all about regenerative agriculture and large-scale land reuse and changing the food system completely. And that, of course, needs to happen. But I think it can maybe most effectively happen in our backyards.
From the orchard here at Jubilee Community Church to the chef's garden at Vicia, Matt's Foodscapes are weaving urban agriculture into the St. Louis landscape. For more information on custom foodscaping as well as all of the other incredible makers we cover in this series, just head to wearetastemakers.com. Thanks for joining me here in St. Louis, and I will see you next time. Connect with us online at wearetastemakers.com or through social media on these handles.
tasteMAKERS was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.